Welcome to our podcast, The Better You Are, The Better You Are. Whether it is physically, mentally, or spiritually, when you know better, you can do better. And when you do better, you'll be better. On this podcast, we share knowledge, expertise, opinions, and experiences. All things that can help you to change the game. By the time we're done, it's hard for you not to be encouraged. So join us. The better you are, the better you are.
So let's start off with some statistics. According to the American Cancer Society, breast cancer is the most common cancer diagnosed among women in the United States, and it is the second leading cause of death from cancer among women, only lung cancer killing more women each year. Over 300,000 new cases of breast cancer will be diagnosed, they predict, in 2024. 1 in 8 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer in her lifetime. And unfortunately, over 40,000 deaths related to breast cancer are expected. As with many other healthcare concerns, Black women are affected more aggressively, often with this condition. Black women are 40% more likely to die of breast cancer than white women and are twice as likely to die if they are younger than 50. Okay, I'm thoroughly excited to have our discussion on breast cancer today, and we have 3 fabulous speakers to be with us today. First, we have Valerie Dean. Valerie Dean was born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama. She is currently living in Pinson, Alabama, and is the wife, mother of 2, and the proud grandmother of 2 grandchildren. She works as an accountant for a major utility company. Her journey with breast cancer began at the start of the COVID pandemic when she became the caretaker for her mother, and continued through July of 2021 when her husband was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. 2 years later, she was diagnosed with stage 2 invasive ductal carcinoma breast cancer, despite no known family history. Her diagnosis began with a fall that turned into a life-changing revelation, sparking a journey filled with realizing the faith, strength, and courage she didn't even know she had. We also have Latrice Johnson. Latrice Johnson is a 3-time cancer survivor. She has a diagnosis of Hodgkin's disease twice, as well as breast cancer. She has been cancer-free from her last bout for 14 years. She and her husband, Paul, live in Chicago. And when I reached out to her, she said she would be honored to be a part of this discussion. And last but not least, we have Dr. Monet Williams-Bowling. Dr. Bowling leads the breast cancer team at Hendricks Regional Health in Indiana. She is board certified in surgery and fellowship trained in breast surgical oncology. She hails from Decatur, Georgia. She attended Spelman College, where she obtained a BS in biology, and then went on to Indiana University, where she earned a master's degree in medical science and a medical degree. Her general surgery training was completed at Indiana University, and she completed her fellowship training at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center in Dallas. She is highly renowned in her field and a passionate crusader in the fight against breast cancer. Dr. Bowling is happily married to Don Bowling II, a teacher and varsity boys basketball coach at a local high school, and she is the mother of twin boys and a young daughter. She describes her family as the pride of her life and her most rewarding accomplishment. She enjoys creating wonderful humans that will contribute their gifts to the world. She always has a welcoming smile, and despite her busy work and personal life, she did not hesitate to agree to be a part of today's program, as did Valerie and Latrice. I thank you all for being here today, and I'm excited to get on with this discussion. I thought that we'd start out by just having Valerie and Latrice share their stories with us to understand what happened to them and then we can go on from there. Latrice, let's start with you. You're 14 years cancer-free, hallelujah, but let's talk about when you were first diagnosed, how you found out, what you felt like, anything you want to share with us.
Oh, okay. Well, it's a rather long story, but I'll try to make it brief. My first diagnosis with cancer, I have to go back to my first, as Lauren illustrated, I am a 3-time cancer survivor. My first bout happened when I was at the age of 14. I developed a rash on my hand. And I was very meticulous about my hands as a young person. So my mother took me to a dermatologist, and the dermatologist noticed a lump in my neck, which none of us had noticed. So he immediately notified my pediatrician. They ran some tests, and my mother, her Mother's Day present when I was 14 was for her to receive the news that your daughter has cancer. That was my mother's Mother's Day present. So, and on a Sunday when a doctor calls your home, that's never a good thing. So I was rushed to the hospital on Monday, and I had surgery, exploratory surgery. They took out some nodes out of my body, and I found out it was Hodgkin's disease, did exploratory biopsies and such. As a result of that, I had radiation therapy to my chest area and to my upper cranial area in the back of my head. And my next gift, or my mother's next gift, and my next gift was, well, because of the treatment, and I'm hoping medicine has improved such over the years. Thank you, Dr. Bowling. But the gift that I got after Hodgkin's disease was that your daughter will probably develop breast cancer as a result of the radiation she received to her chest area. So that was the first shoe dropping. And we were just always waiting for the next shoe to drop. We were also told at the time when I had Hodgkin's disease during the first bout that the gestation period or remission period, once you go from 4 to 6 years, you're pretty much out of the weeds from getting a reoccurrence of breast cancer. Well, I got another present 8 years later that Hodgkin's disease had returned. And as a result of that, I had chemotherapy and radiation therapy, and no breast cancer yet, though. So, we always knew it was in the back of our minds that it could appear. And lo and behold, I believe when I was 44, it came up. And I've been having mammograms since I was like 25. So I continually had mammograms. I had mammograms early, to look for that cancer. And I developed LCIS. I took tamoxifen. And then I think I was only on tamoxifen. And Dr. Bowling can tell you about the side effects of tamoxifen and what's involved in that. But I took tamoxifen for almost a year, I think, before the full-fledged breast cancer came about. So that's my journey through this world and word called cancer. And there are many ups and downs with that as well. But overall, I know God has a plan for all of us. And I just believe that is the plan that he had for me and the path he had for me to take, because I meet so many beautiful people, much like my new friend Valerie here,
Amen.
To help them through their journey as well. And right now, I'm also, if I may, Lauren and everyone, I'm also helping my 70-year-old aunt through her journey of breast cancer right now.
Amen. Dr. Bowling, do you have any comments you want to make regarding what she mentioned and the advances, hopefully, in medicine, et cetera?
Oh, so many. Just hearing that story brings back just a whole host of information. I think that the one thing that we have gotten better at is treating lymphomas, and to be very particular about how that radiation is delivered so that it is almost exclusively directed to the locations it needs to be directed to. Your case, Latrice, for young patients that had thyroid cancer, lymphomas, and other types of bloodborne cancers that had to get mantle radiation. That is a very common story, and they were always waiting for the shoe to drop. What I find the most interesting is that someone actually told you that there was going to be a shoe that was going to drop, because many people have no clue. And when I ask those questions and I say, hey, have you ever had chest radiation? Has that ever occurred for you? They're like, oh yeah, when I was a kid, I developed this. And I was like, oh, and where did they do that radiation? And they're like, oh, it's just right here. I'm like, in the same location as your breast cancer? Okay. So it is very interesting. And I'm so happy. I know it probably is a very difficult kind of existence to know that the cancer is coming. But I often feel like it's very good to know that so that you can get mammograms at a very early age, because a lot of people don't. That's the first issue. Second thing is that thank goodness that you were being very proactive. You've had an amazing team. So oftentimes we do not hear that story of people who have lobular carcinoma in situ, or what Latrice called LCIS. That is a pre-malignant lesion. And what that can do is lead to either invasive lobular cancer or invasive ductal cancer. Those two are the most common types of breast cancer that women can develop. It makes up about 85% of all breast cancer. And she was placed on preventative medication and took it. So all of those things are so important, because oftentimes I have patients who've been diagnosed with cancer who I can't get to take tamoxifen. So I applaud you from the start. Unfortunately, there are so many other factors that go into that. Those radiation changes that happen to the skin have happened. So you're trying to hold off the breast cancer from occurring, but oftentimes that damage has already occurred. And so the breast cancer is coming at some point at which it did. That tamoxifen is an anti-hormone therapy. What it does is it blocks the hormones in your body, most specifically estrogen and progesterone. And that is done so that you can keep cells from turning on cancer cells, because cancer cells can carry estrogen and progesterone. And as those cells get turned on, the tumor cells get fed and they grow, which is often, unfortunately for Dr. Dutchy Porthers, who prescribes hormones, I am the anti-hormone doctor over here. So I try to keep those hormones away from women, because what has been shown is longer than a 5-year history of being on hormone therapy. That is direct exogenous. You're taking hormone therapy, getting pellets, whatever you're doing. Longer than a 5-year stint of that can lead to an increased risk of breast cancer. So it doesn't necessarily have to cause breast cancer, but it can lead to an increased risk. And that's why Latrice was placed on that hormone blocker to decrease the amount of estrogen that she has in her body. And so I applaud your team, because they were following, and somebody was paying a lot of attention and made sure that they were catching things when they were at a much earlier stage than later. So I think that it's unfortunate what happened, but you clearly followed the algorithm and made sure that you were taking care of your health.
So Latrice, can I ask you, so then how'd you find out you had breast cancer? You were just getting those yearly or those regular mammograms, and
Yes.
And they found it on the mammogram?
Yes. As I mentioned, we found out that I had the LCIS, and it was like, oh boy, that's a precursor, because, and I'm going to put it in total layman terms, and Dr. Bowling can explain. They explained to me that LCIS was like, imagine the cancer being in a straw. And it was milk in a straw. It was inside the straw. And so we want to keep it there. If the milk starts dripping out of the straw, that's when we have bigger problems. So I'm like, okay, I know there's cancer in there, but it's contained in the straw. That's what I always kept in my mind. So I had the, the biopsy where they put the little metal screw or whatever, or wire in your breast. I had that done. And had another going for my annual mammo, went for the mammo, and the process is you go in, you get your mammo done, you go home. Well, if you go in, you get your mammo done, and they say go sit in this room, there's a problem. It's like, that's not good. No one wants that second, room to go to door number 2. It's like, So I'm sitting in there, I'm praising God and saying, we're going to get through this. Always had doubt with me, always take them with me. We're going to do this. And if I made my theme song, whenever I'm laying in an MRI, or I'm taking a CAT scan, or I'm taking a mammo when I took the mammos, because I'm always under a machine, it seems. The song that resonates in my mind is His Eyes on the Sparrow. So I know He's watching over me. So that's the song I hum, and I know that He's with me. So sitting in the room with a bunch of other ladies in our paper gowns waiting for the results. They come back and they say, okay, well, we're going to have to do an ultrasound. Wait a minute, never had to have an ultrasound, and need that get approved. So I know something's going on. I know something's happening. And I said, okay, this is it. I just put it in my mind that this is the breast cancer. I had the ultrasound done, then go back. They called me for an appointment. This is over a couple of days, I don't think it was too many days. So my husband and I would go back and hear the news. Yes, we believe you have a tumor, breast cancer, need you to see a surgeon. So that's how it was. And like Dr. Bowling said, because I knew it was coming, it was just when. So it's like, okay, this is the conversation. This is it. And this time I was blessed to have my husband along with me for the ride of this bout of cancer, and we got through it with flying colors. So I hope that helps.
Lauren, Dr. Donji Prethter, so what Latrice is describing is kind of a diagnostic image. That's the image where you actually get your images and you wait. That is done for women who feel something, have a mass, or coming to the radiologist's area, the mammography area, and they wait for their results because we could need to do more testing. So that's called diagnostic imaging. What people mostly get are called screening images, where you get a screening mammogram. They do it in two directions. And for those who've had mammograms, you go in, you put your arm straight through, or you put your arm kind of on the outside. You get as much compression as they can possibly give you without you screaming. And then, you move on from there and they let you go. Diagnostic images, the radiologists read them on site and decide if we need to do more testing. And so if something is seen, usually in that breast center, they have the capability of waiting, letting you kind of sit there for a moment and then say, hey, we need to do an ultrasound or possibly a biopsy. It doesn't always happen that you have to have a biopsy, because I've been in that room multiple times. I've been called back several times and I've had those things done. But that is called diagnostic imaging. So that's how we follow patients that have a mass that is palpable, something that they've described to their primary care physician. And that is why they're coming to get their mammogram, because there's something new, there's something on the skin, there's some kind of change that prompted the mammogram. So that's a little bit different than a screening mammogram that people come for just when they're just getting their annual, like you get to pop in and out, and that is it.
Okay. Well, Valerie, let's talk about your history, because you weren't expecting anything to
No,
identify.
I was not. As you read in my bio, I say it started as a fall. I was out working in the yard and I fell on the cement into a flower bed. And when I fell, I ended up with a bruise on my left arm. And the bruise stayed for a while, and I didn't think that enough of it. I thought it was a fall. It was a fall. Well, a month later, I think it was Mother's Day weekend, and I was asleep. And normally I kind of roll over sleep on my stomach. And when I rolled over, I felt the pain in my left breast, and I was like, ouch. And so that's when I felt the lump. And I was like, that's odd. But the strange thing with that is I was in search of a new gynecologist, because the one that I had, I wasn't too pleased with. And so at that point, I had not found one. And because we were coming through the pandemic and all of that. So I just said, well, I'm still looking. I'm still looking. That was my thing. And so after the fall, and when I felt the lump, I said, well, I better go on and go back to the old gynecologist that I had. I did, and they did the mammogram and ultrasound on that day. So I knew that the lump was there because it was in line with the same impact of the bruise in my arm. So in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, it's just trauma to my breast. You know, breast cancer was the last thing I was thinking. And so and I told the technicians when they were doing my mammogram and ultrasound, I said, yeah, this is what happened, blah, blah, blah. And so after that, they called me in to have my doctor called me and wanted me to consult with have this general surgeon to do my biopsy. And I left work, went to this general surgeon to do my biopsy. And so when I got over there, I told him the same story that I told the technicians. Oh, I fell, and could it be a fall? Could it be trauma or whatever? Well, he proceeded to tell me, well, I was just asking him what his thoughts were. Well, when he pitched to me, he just looked at me and said, "Oh, it's cancer. Your lymph nodes even look abnormal." And so I'm like, "What? What are you telling me? What are you saying?" And he said, "Yep, it's cancer. Do you need anything? Do you want some water? Just you could take whatever time you need here, but I'm literally sitting on the table boo-hooing because I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I can't go home and tell my husband and my mom who's relying on me or tell my family that this is what I got. So I'm just like devastated. Even when I got ready to leave that office, the nurses were like, "Oh, the exit is that way." Nobody had any kind of compassion for me that day. So I got to my car finally, and I know I have a sister-in-law that's an RN, and I called her, and she was the only one that I told. And I was like, "What do you think?" And she's like, "Well, he could tell and he could not tell." She said, "But he can't really diagnose anything until you have until you get the pathology report back." And so I said, "Well, okay." She said, "But if I were you, I would get a second opinion as well." And so this was on a Thursday. Friday morning, that surgeon started calling me, and he was throwing out all of this cancer terminology to me. And I'm like, "I don't know what you're saying." I'm like, "I'm still trying to wrap my head around the fact that you're saying that I have cancer." And I was like, part of me was like in denial because I'm like, "I don't believe you because the way you came to me, and you don't have any facts." And he kept saying, "I don't have your pathology report back." And he called me that Friday. He called that Monday. He called that Tuesday. Each time he called, he said he didn't have the pathology report, but he was still just talking to me about what all I would need to do with this. And I'm like, and so at that point, my husband said, "Don't answer his calls anymore." And I said, had already made up my mind that I was going to get a second opinion. And so I was waiting on that appointment to get the second opinion. And he still called. He still called. And so on that Friday of the following week, after he kept calling saying he didn't have all the results back, and I told him, I said, "You don't have to call me anymore," because he wanted me to go and have a breast MRI done. And I said, "You don't have to call me anymore because I'm getting a second opinion." And his exact words with me were, "Well, sweetheart, you have every right to a second opinion, but I've never really given you a first opinion." "Yes, you did. You told me in your office that you thought it was cancer, and I had cancer, and my lymph nodes looked abnormal." And so he said, "Well, Mom, I know a lot about cancer. My mom has cancer." And I'm like, "Okay, but all of them are different. You don't know about mine. You still don't have my pathology report back." So it was a little, after I left him, which was a good thing, I called my next team, my team of angels, because I went to UAB and I had a breast surgeon set up, um, my oncologist and a radiologist. All of them, which they met with me, my husband, my sister-in-law that went with me, and my kids were on the phone. So any questions that they had or I had, they were willing to answer, and they kind of laid everything out for me. And I told them, I said, "I don't really trust the results of this past surgeon. I said, so if I have to take all of the tests over again, I had already called my insurance and to find out if they would even pay for that. And I told them, I said, as painful as that biopsy was, I'm willing to take it over again. So they engaged me. They gave me all of the testing over again. And so when they came back to me, I trusted them because of how thorough they were. Because each day I was having to go for a different test. They test my bones to make sure that the cancer had not spread and all of that. So, but all in all, after all of the testing, it was determined that I did have the breast cancer. It was only in my left breast. And they came up with my treatment plan of I did 2 different types of chemo. Then after the chemo, I had surgery. And at that point, they were just wanting to remove my left breast. And I told them, I said, I kind of felt like I needed to do both because I was afraid that if it came back, if it showed up in the left breast this time, who's to say it won't come back in the right breast, which I know that there's a chance of it coming back, period. But I think I had less of a chance of it coming back by going ahead and doing the double mastectomy. So when they did my surgery, they did the double mastectomy and they took out 8 lymph nodes on the left side because it was showing up in my lymph nodes. But the beauty of it all, the chemo killed all of the cancer cells. So they said when they sent the breast tissues and the lymph nodes off to the lab after my surgery, there was no sign of cancer in none of it, except for in one lymph node. They said one lymph node had a slight trace, but it wasn't enough to measure. So, but they still wanted to do the radiation after that. And so after that, they recommended I do 5 weeks, 25 rounds of radiation. And I just finished that on May 10th. But all in all, they said that I was cancer free. And on this past Monday, had my port removed. So,
Amen.
I just thank God for what I've been through and what I've come through.
Thank you for listening in today. Weren't you inspired, encouraged, and uplifted? We hope so, because we're praying the best for you. Join us again next time for more betterment, because the better you are, the better you are.